So like I said, we were just hoping to kind of pull back the curtain on what it takes to co-organize a hack night that has run virtually every week for the last 2 years, because we've learned a lot through doing it. And sometimes it's hard to find moments to share back some of what we've learned and some of how that works. And also because we are really interested in figuring out how to get you on board and kind of into the rotation. We've already done this poll, but wanted to start out with a kind of overview of who does what when, so you get a sense of the big picture before we zoom in on specific roles. So if you're new to Hacknights, we run these every Tuesday except for 2 weeks in December. They generally have this first hour, which is introduction, speaker, and then a Q&A following the speaker, and then pitches. So this is kind of one little block of time. And then the second hour, 8 to 9 p.m. is breakouts. So the first hour, we're all in one room together. And then for the last hour, we break out into different breakout rooms and work on different projects. So through this first hour, we have the MC, who tonight is Chris, and the chat mod, who is me this evening. And then once that kind of hour splits, we have a couple other people who take on more active roles, which are the Civic Tech 101 host, who I believe is Gabe this evening, and the social host, who I believe is Adam this evening. So those are the 4 Hack Night roles. And then there's other roles that are not done on Tuesdays, but they're done throughout the month. So that's like communications, happens when it needs to happen. Speaker booking, also, we try to book almost every week having a speaker, so that kind of also as it needs to happen. And then there's 3 roles that I'm not going to get into tonight because they're a little bit specific and also a little bit boring. One of which is the Wrangler, who chairs our monthly co-organizer meeting, which happens on the 3rd Monday of every month. And so that person is responsible for setting up the agenda for the meeting, chairing the meeting, and also generally just making sure that things happen. We also have a couple of financial officers because we are a community organization with a bank account. So we need to have people who can sign checks and approve things. And we also have kind of ad hoc projects and initiatives. This is this bucket that I've called it, which are things that come up that are exciting or time sensitive, which could be like updating the website or responding to a code of conduct report. So those 3 I'm not going to get into. That's all you're going to get. But we can talk about that more in the Q&A or breakout if those are things that you're interested in. But we are going to get into these first 6. So before we get into those, I just wanted to say that you don't need any experience to take on a co-organizing role. And I think this is something that I've valued a lot. And I think Civic Tech Toronto generally is a space that really values finding opportunities for learning, and also, it's going to sound funny, but finding opportunities to like fail gently. I've learned a lot by doing things wrong, especially like the first time that I was MC. I got a lot of really good feedback, a lot of really good constructive feedback that I specifically asked for. But you also won't get people being like, wow, that was rough. Like, people are really nice here. So just before you see, like, sometimes it looks as you're going through like key responsibilities will feel like a bit like, oh, I've never done that before, but it's no problem. You can totally do it. So we're going to get into each role. We'll have a separate card, and you'll see like the title of the role, and then a little summary, and then the key responsibilities. And I'll talk through some of those. And I'm not going to say out loud this right side of the deck, but we will share the link to the deck so you can have all this information to follow up with. Information like time commitment, what are the tech requirements? So that could be like Zoom, Google Slides, different co-organizers who have filled this role, so people you might be able to use as resources if you have specific questions. And then a link to the full run sheet, which is a very detailed Google Doc with all of the specific responsibilities for that role. So the first role is the MC. They keep the energy high, they make sure everyone feels comfortable and welcome, and they keep the night on schedule. Somehow that last one, keeping the night on schedule, is the hardest one. So generally you will be hosting that first hour from 7 to 8 p.m. But you also have a little bit of preparation to do, getting this intro deck template together that we have, and welcoming and coordinating with the speaker. And kind of most importantly, you're just a friendly, welcoming face, because you're this like first introduction that people have to the group. And then chat moderator supports the Emcee and provides real-time links in the chat to make Hacknights more accessible and engaging for all. So you might have noticed that I was posting in the chat like, oh, put a cue to do an intro. And this is all links that we have preset that you share at preset times, but there's also sharing links that come up in some of the speakers' presentations. And generally being that like warm, friendly face that the Emcee is in the video, you're that within the chat. Then now it's 8 p.m. and we've broken off into breakout rooms. And one of those breakout rooms is hosted by the Civic Tech 101 hosts. So they host this 101 session for new and returning members on the history and current activities of Civic Tech Toronto, followed by an open Q&A. Depending on how you feel like approaching this could be more conversational. You can present from a deck that we have. The deck is all set up, so you don't need to feel like, ooh, how could I possibly know enough? And this role, yeah, this is just another one where being engaging, friendly, and having fun is kind of like the fundamental part of it, because it is where new faces to Civic Tech might land. It's kind of getting people onboarded into the Slack and letting them know we have social media and kind of how things work. And if you don't want to go into a breakout room and work on projects, you might just stay in the main Zoom room at 8 p.m. and just hang out. And that's where the social host comes in. They keep the conversation flowing in the main Zoom room during the Hacknight breakouts for anyone who wants to socialize rather than work on a project. And that means like keeping the conversation going, getting to know people, and then sometimes it means making connections to different people or projects based on the interests that you're hearing people have. So those first four are the roles that come up on Tuesday nights, and the next two are ones that are kind of as it happens. Communications, I would say, is generally like a Sunday, Monday scenario, getting us set up for Tuesday. They advertise upcoming Hacknights and promote other initiatives of interest to Toronto Civic Tech community on our social media. And so that's usually Twitter and LinkedIn. And so the kind of baseline task that the comms person is doing is advertising upcoming Hacknights on these two social media channels. But it is great if you have the energy to kind of keep an eye on the Twitter, keep an eye on the LinkedIn and the Slack, and see what's coming up, events, things of interest, public consultations, and kind of cross-post those to different channels. So the community can kind of get a sense of what's going on without necessarily keeping an eye on all three of those channels. And last but not least, the speaker booker identifies and books engaging, topical, and/or relevant presenters to share a brief presentation on their work and ideas. This person, or multiple people, as it has been more recently, we've approached this more fluidly, serves as a main point of contact for the speaker and provides all of the information that the speaker needs leading up to the Hacknight. So different logistics, different tech requirements, getting the kind of bio and presentation details from that speaker and updating the meetup. And we have templates for all of this. This might sound like a huge endeavor, but we have like email templates. We have a spreadsheet that keeps everything tracked. So it's actually a pretty manageable task. Now that we've got this overview of these six, maybe you have a little bit of a better idea of what it means that the Emcee and the chat mod are both happening within this first hour, and they're very closely related roles. And then the comms and the speaker booker also work pretty closely together because they're generally communicating similar information. And then these two Civic Tech 101 host and social host, they happen at the same time, but they aren't really related. Okay, great. That was a lot of information, but like, what does it mean to me? And so I generally imagine that you have one of these four mindsets at this point. So the first one is, oh, I'm so excited and I definitely want to try this role. So I would suggest that you join our Slack channel, #organizingopen, and let us know that you're interested in that role. And then also take a look, we'll share the link to this deck, and then you can click on that run sheet link and see exactly what that role entails. If you are interested, but a little bit nervous to do it. Definitely do those first two things, but also feel free to reach out to someone who's done that role before and ask what it was like. We are a volunteer-run organization, so I can't promise that we will get back in a timely manner or like get back at all. So you might also just post in the #organizing open channel and say, hey, so-and-so, anytime. And then if someone else wants to jump in, they can also share some info. We haven't really done role shadowing before, but it's totally on the table. If you're like, I would love to be MC, but I don't really understand what it entails, reach out to whoever is the MC that week and say like, hey, do you mind if I kind of like, I don't know, we'll have to figure that out on a kind of ad hoc basis, but it's totally doable. The third sort of like phase is I'm not really interested in any of these roles, but I still want to get involved somehow. You should come out to our monthly organizer meeting. It's the third Monday of every month, which means it was yesterday because that's the way that months work. But you're definitely welcome to come out to the next organizer meeting, or just like let us know in the Slack channel. Again, that's kind of the place that we communicate outside of Hacknights. There's always stuff to do. There's always like, oh, this little website update, or we have some like threads to follow from the last organizer meeting notes that you can see like, is this something I'm interested in? Hybrid Hacknights? That's a big question for us if you're interested in that. You can also work on a project or start your own project. So like I mentioned, we break off at 8 p.m. to work on different projects. And if you are new, you'll see what that looks like this evening. That is a super way to get involved. And the last but not least, which I put this heart emoji, and maybe you're like, I actually don't feel all of these hearts. You don't have to. I'm from another organization, but I'm interested in why you do something the way that you do. You are more than welcome to take all of this information, take it wholesale and use it wherever you want. You can also adapt it. We really value other people being able to build off of the things that we've already done. So don't feel like, ooh, I'm gonna step on toes. You're definitely not. I feel like I've said this a million times, join our Slack channel and introduce yourself and just ask any questions that you have, and we'll try to get back to you. And also feel free to reach out to co-organizers who might have time to chat one-on-one. I'm making this offer without having consulted with other people. So the caveat here is that people might not have time, and it is not, it's not anything to do with you. It's just because we're all volunteering here. So with that, I'm gonna move us into the Q&A, and I wanted to leave these 6 up just for a second because it's been a minute since we looked at these roles specifically, but these are the roles that we talked about this evening. I'm gonna stop. Oh wait, no, we are gonna record the Q&A. Okay, cool. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then we're gonna do a Q&A. Sorry, I'm trying to be cat mod and presenter at the same time, and it's not really working. Oh, wow. Thank you, PatCon, for sharing all these links. This is fantastic. Just as with, sorry, Chris, do you mind
and I mean,
narrating while
okay, Chris is back. Okay, great.
Okay, awesome. Sorry, no, I am here. I just wasn't sure whether you wanted me to take over, Sam. I didn't want to. Anyway, so for Q&A, just to give you a heads up, we've got quite a few present, former, related co-organizers here today. So when you're asking questions, there may be like a pretty good spread in terms of what people respond. Everyone's had different experiences and different perspectives. And one of the really unique ways that Civic Tech Trio is, like Civic Tech Toronto is kind of run, as opposed to some other organizations that I'm sure you've been a part of, is that we are super like democratic, and people come forward, and there's like a lot of that kind of, a lot of those pieces of like making decisions that other organizations might find like kind of messy, or, you know, sort of, that's not how we do things here. We just, this is the line, now toe it. And we don't really tend to do that. So the structure is sort of built around that. And so with the Q&A, do expect a little bit of that. And with that being said, Sam, do you have any idea how you'd like the Q&A to go? Just drop a letter in the chat.
Yeah. I can't multitask. So I was trying to find the text to copy into the chat. But yeah, I think like any questions you have are good. If you have a role specific question, if you have like how did things come to be? What have you learned over the last 2 years? All good questions.
Sam?
Okay, I'll ask the question. Okay, go ahead, Skydra. I was gonna put one in there, but thanks for jumping in.
I'm sorry. I don't like awkward silence. Not that it's awkward, I just don't like silence. No, I was gonna ask you, like, maybe it's worth kind of also talking about some of the newer roles that have emerged in the last 2 years. Well, not even new roles, but like new approach to roles, like, you know, the idea of like chat moderation and really just taking into considered like distributed facilitation and how that's kind of evolved. And yeah.
Totally. And I will say that I was not here pre-virtual in a meaningful way. So I can only speak to like how things are now. The chat mod was, and I like, as I was running through practicing this deck, I was like, do I put this in or is this so silly? So I'm going to tell you the line that I cut from this presentation, which is like, I know that not all of you feel good about the word innovation, but the chat moderator role is Civic Tech's biggest innovation over the last 2 years. Because it's just, I feel like it makes such a big difference to have someone who is like dropping links actively. And it also is like to some extent, like an accessibility consideration that we pose questions out loud and then we put them in the chat so that there is a reference point. So when people are like, what am I answering? Like there's a bit of a reference point. One thing that we started doing and we don't do anymore, oh my goodness, this is a tangent, I'm sorry. But just for accessibility was asking speakers to share their slides with us ahead of time so that we could share them out, which is something that doesn't feel normal in a physical space. But once we were virtual, it was kind of like, well, why wouldn't we share the slides out so people can refer back and ask like meaningful questions? Yeah, I don't know. I want to like invite anyone else who has any thoughts on how things have shifted in terms of organizing over the last couple of years.
So I also wasn't here pre-pandemic, but we do have another question.
Oh, good.
From Mita, and she asked how often do the roles change, and clarified in that people take turns in different roles, not the roles themselves.
That's a great question that I meant to say out loud. The ones that are Tuesday night, so like Emcee, chat mod, Civic Tech host, social host, those generally change up every month. And then the comms and speaker booking have been longer term roles, so about 6 months or sometimes longer. Yeah. I don't know. Adam has a question mark and Pat Kahn has a hand up. So whoever wants to go first.
All right, I will go. You did great, by the way. I just, in case there are people that don't know this, we don't usually have the chat moderator as the speaker. So it was something that PatCon sort of bailed us out, but it was sort of one of those things where I knew I didn't have the physical ability, but when I realized you were the chat moderator, but also the speaker, part of me was like, oh shit, we didn't plan this totally out the best. And thank you for doing all the speaking. I know it's for somebody that's slightly more quiet and probably not as used to doing this. Thank you. End of thought.
yeah, I feel like this is the perfect example of of like successful failure, where yeah, I like totally blanked on that I am kind of doing 2 roles at one time, but PackOn was here to catch me. Just like there's always someone, and even if there's not someone to catch you, like life goes on. PackOn, yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like related to, I don't know, I really value I think when Emily McRae and Alex Jung and I did a presentation about about like how we were at a conference for other organizers, it was one of the things we kind of realized that we do is, oh, we constrain just enough to like that we know is essential, and then we let everything else kind of float, and it's okay to kind of, you know, to not always remember, like knowing a thing is like dangerous because then you can't imagine it another way. So it's like, I think it feels like there's an intention to like, you know, I say like forget things, but it's not like there were real things. Like there's like the ability to kind of like, oh, we all knew this one thing in one cohort of organizers, but then before that we all knew this other thing, and now we know different things very, you know, we feel like we know them really well, but then we're allowed to forget kind of thing sometimes, and hopefully the good stuff is what sticks. I was curious to ask if there's time whether, I feel like Bianca is, I've been curious about her role because she was really active at the beginning and then like kind of was just a bit more distant for a while, whereas in like, yeah, I'm curious, I don't know whether there's any things you notice like from when you were kind of organizing, and then yeah, just things you noticed from like the little bit of the stop motion, what's the word, time lapse view.
Yeah, I think things are amazing now. And I think it's probably one of the few examples where I've been involved in something where I stepped back and like then was away for a bit. And when I returned, it's like, this is different. And, you know, it's just so good. And it feels like everybody is able to figure kind of what you were just saying, PackOn. It's like some of it's still the same, some of it has evolved. I think having the definition of these roles tight enough that like each little experience online is evolving too, because like the in-person and the online is a real, like that's its own whole, you know, when Sam says it's only been online, like my head kind of spins, because there's a lot more, I don't know, almost like flexibility with people when you're in person in a way. Like I think you can just pick up more on how to adapt. But yeah, I feel like it's cool that there's enough structure that it has survived some basics and then tons of flexibility, and that lots of different, I show up sometimes, I'm like meeting new people all the time, like people are taking on different roles. So the way that you're setting it up to turnover seems to be working, which I think is great. And I think the last thing I'll say is sometimes as a former facilitator, making things too democratic can get counterproductive, like when you have too little structure. So it also sounds like you struck a really good balance there. Because I think early on, sometimes every decision can feel like, okay, let's do rounds and rounds on this, which can get really tiring, which is great, but in some cases it's too much. So basically it sounds like everything's better, and I'm just really happy like to be back and to see better, you know, improvement as things should be, right? Like things should, as time goes on, change, and I just think it's amazing what everybody's done. So that's my reflection. And you actually, before I shut up, you do a lot of connective tissue work that I think it's not a role, but if you weren't here, PackOn, I don't know, like there's stuff between these roles, maybe would be a better way to say it. I think that and that's the catching people and also the space for creativity. So that's probably good for other people to hear. There's these roles and then there's just being around, and there's always room for that too. So, okay, I'll stop.
Awesome. Okay, so as you saw in the roles, it is my job as MC to keep us on schedule, which now that it's